Good day, everyone. I'm happy to be back to you again. I hope our day has been good. Mine has been good too. Okay, last class we talked about this type 1 and type 2 errors that are seen in a hypothesis. We said the type 1 error occurs when we reject a null hypothesis when in fact we should accept it. That is to say, the null hypothesis is right, it is correct, but we reject it. That becomes type 1 error. And then the type 2 error, we accept the null hypothesis when we should indeed reject it. That's when the null hypothesis is wrong and we go ahead to accept it rather than reject it. It becomes type 2 error. And then we said that for us to avoid these errors, a sure way of doing it is to increase our sample size. We know that the larger the sample size, the better for us. The less possibility for us to have errors. So the way of avoiding all these errors is to increase our sample size. Then we also talked about this test, some of the several kinds of inferential tests that are used in analysis of data. We mentioned the t-test, the analysis of variance, the chi-square, the correlation and regression analysis. And then we said that we are going to talk about them in detail in this next class. All right, let's get it down. The inferential test in analysis of data. Inferential test in analysis of data. All right, we're going to take them one after the other and explain them in detail. The first one is the t-test. The t-test. The t-test is normally used to compare the means of two groups of data, which means that the data being compared should be quantitative. You remember your means. It works on means, it's calculated means using figures. So if you're talking about means, you're talking about data that is quantitative. So it's normally used to compare the means of two groups of data, which means that the data being compared should be quantitative. These two groups of data may be for two independent samples or maybe for the same sample with the data collected at two different periods. That is third sample. So the samples could be independent, two different, completely different samples, or they can be the same samples, but the difference is that they were collected at two different periods. Take for instance, you're collecting samples on a monthly basis for a period of maybe 6 to 8 months. The sample you collected this month, the sample you collected in the month of March will be different from the sample you collected in the month of April. They are the same samples but at different periods. So you're likely to have you're likely to have different numbers. So if based on the above observed p-value, it is decided that the two groups are different, then one should be able to say which group has the larger mean. So if they're different, that means they have two different means. And if you have, remember we are talking about figures, if you have two different means, it simply means that one mean is of a different value with the other one. That is to say, one is larger than the other one. Now that takes us to analysis of variance. Analysis of variance. This test commonly referred to as ANOVA. ANOVA. AN analysis, O of and VA variant. It's commonly referred to as ANOVA for short. Is normally used to examine the effects of qualitative independent variables on a quantitative dependent variable. So you're talking about two different variables now. One is qualitative and independent, and the other is quantitative and dependent. The one way ANOVA is its simplest form and is used for comparing the means of several groups. Let's look at an example of let me use this table to explain this ANOVA better for you. Let's look at a situation whereby you're looking at the effects of some powdered milk on the growth of children. Effects of powdered milk on the growth of children. Okay, we have a table. Let's insert a table here. We have this as the effect of different types of powdered milk. Okay, because we are talking about independent, we are talking about qualitative variables. So we are looking at the type of powdered milk, types of powdered milk, let me accept this. Okay. Let's say you took your samples for a period of, let's say 1 month. A period of 1 month, that is 4 different weeks. This is the first week. First week, second week, third week, and fourth week. So the weight as you take let's take the different kind of powdered milk. We have Nido, let's give it N. We have Peak, P. We have Cowbell, C. And then we have mother's milk, breast milk. The breast milk here is going to serve as our control. Okay, so this week, in this section, we are going to have the weight of the babies, the weight of the children in kilograms. So I just using assumed figures here. Let's say for Nido, you give them Nido, you test their weight in for the first week. For the first week, let's say you have 10 kg. Second week, 10 kg. Third week, 15 kg. And then fourth week, let's say we have 20 kg. And then for pig, first week we have 12 kg. Second week, 12 kg again. Third week, 17 kg. 17 kg. And then the fourth week, we have 24 kg. For cowbell, let's say the first week we have 9 kg. Second week, 10 kg. Third week, 13 kg. And then the fourth week, 20 kg. For the mother's milk, that's the breast milk, we have 8 kg here. Second week we have 9 kg. Third week we have 12 kg. And then the fourth week we have 22 kg. This is what a table of ANOVA will look like. In this case, we have the types of powdered milk being qualitative. You can see they are not measured, they're just different types of milk. And then they are independent variables. Whereas the weight, the different weights we have are quantitative. It can be measured, you can weigh, you can measure the weight. So they are quantitative variables and they are dependent. The weight you have for each week is dependent on the milk, the type of milk that was taken. Let's look at this first week. We have 10 kg. They weighed 10 kg when they were giving needle. When they were giving a different kind of milk, which is thick, you have 12 kg. With cowbell, we have 9 kg. And with breast milk, we have 8 kg. So this is what we can use to see the effect of this particular milk on the growth of the baby. Let's take out your test. ANOVA is normally used to examine the effect of qualitative independent variables, in this case, the type of milk, on a quantitative dependent variable, in this case, the weight of the children. The one-way ANOVA is its simplest form and is used for comparing the means of cell groups. When you use the one-way ANOVA, you can use it to compare the means of several groups. If in the end, the null hypothesis is accepted, that all the groups are the same. The mean for each group is the same thing as the mean for the other group. On the other hand, a rejected null hypothesis indicates that not all the means are the same. So a rejected null hypothesis will simply indicate that all the means are not the same, even as it does not mean that they are all different. So when all the means are not the same, it doesn't mean that each and every one of them is different from the other. Some could still be the same and some different, but it's simply telling you that all of them are not the same, like it was when we had to accept the null hypothesis. So to ascertain which pair of means are different, it becomes necessary to conduct a multiple comparison test. A multiple comparison test will help us to know which particular pair of the means are different from each other. Alright, that takes us to chi-square. Chi-square. This kind of test is often used to determine the existence of a relationship between two qualitative variables. Two variables determining the existence of the relationship that they have. Before applying the t-test at all, a contingency table cross tabulation is also usually formed to study the patterns of frequencies in the table. So you need to study the patterns of the t-test at the end, the null hypothesis is rejected. It means that there is a relation in variables. If it is after this that measures are used to determine the strength of the relationship. So when you discover that there is a relationship between the two variables, there has to be a relationship before you can begin to determine the strength. If something is not in existence, there is nothing, there is no strength to determine. So it is when the null hypothesis is rejected, showing that there is a relationship between those two variables, that is when we begin to think of measuring the strength, determining the strength of that particular relationship. And this takes us to correlation and regression analysis. Correlation and regression analysis. These are used to study existing relationships among quantitative variables. These are used to study existing relationship among quantitative variables, and especially that between two quantitative variables. So when there's a relationship between two quantitative and the variables have to be quantitative. In particular, correlation analysis measures the strength of the relationship between the two variables. While the regression, this is regression please, while the regression analysis develops an equation that enables one to predict the value of the dependent variable for different values of the independent variable. Let's take it again. Correlation and regression analysis. These are used to study existing relationships among quantitative variables. That is, two quantitative variables that have a relationship, and especially that between two quantitative variables. In particular, correlation analysis measures the strength of the relationship between the two variables, while regression analysis develops an equation that enables one to predict the value of the dependent variable for different values of independent variables. If you look at our table of milk, regression analysis will give you an equation that will enable you to predict that with that equation, you should be able to predict the value of the dependent variable for different values of the independent one. With the dependent one, it helps you to predict what the value of the dependent one could be. Sorry, before we continue, let me take down those ones. We've done the t-test, analysis of variance and chi-square. T-test, the second one is analysis of variance. Analysis of variance. And the third one is the chi-square. All right. Talk about chi-square. Okay. The next one is correlation and regression analysis. Let's put that one down too. Correlation and regression analysis. All right. So these two methods are commonly used either as descriptive or inferential procedures. As a descriptive procedure, a correlation coefficient is calculated to determine the strength of relationship between two variables. As an inferential procedure, correlation analysis determines whether the observed correlation between the variables as determined from the sample can be generalized on the population. So an impression procedure helps you to determine whether you can use that particular correlation to cover for the entire population. Remember, you're working with the samples here, but it will now help you to determine whether you can use this to generalize, make a generalized format for the overall population. The procedure requires that the p-value is calculated and used to accept or reject the null hypothesis. If the null hypothesis is accepted, that means there is no correlation between the two variables in the population. That is when the null hypothesis is accepted. It means there is no correlation between the two variables. And if there is no correlation, it simply means that you don't need to obtain any regression equation. There is no need to obtain a regression equation as it cannot be used to predict the value of the dependent variable. Okay, having taken that down, we go over to chapter 5. Chapter 5. Summary of findings, conclusions, and recommendations. By now, you're already rounding off with your thesis work. You're looking at the summary, you've gotten all your results, your data, your results, everything. You're now looking at the summary. You're making your conclusions, and from your conclusions, you'll be able to make your recommendations. Okay. Introduction. The presentation of a summary of the study findings comes up, usually in chapter 5. That's towards the end, which is the last in the series. Its purpose is to provide an outline of the main and essential findings of the study, devoid of the details already presented in chapter 4. It opens on an introductory note. Explaining this purpose in very clear terms. Its outline usually includes the following. Summary outline. Have introduction, summary of the findings, conclusions, recommendations, and then suggested areas for further study. Okay? Let's look at the outline. Summary outline. We have our introduction, and then we have summary of the findings. Summary of findings. That's the next one. Summary of the findings. A good presentation of the discussion of results in chapter 4 is of great essence and used to achieving a focused summary of the findings. A good presentation of the discussion of results in chapter 4. You have gotten all your results. Now your ability to present it is of great essence and used to achieve a focused summary of the findings. So the way you present your results will help you to get a good and focused summary. There is indeed a direct relationship between that segment of chapter 4 and the summary of the findings, as the former provides a good outlay of what will go into the latter. Thus, summary of findings is written in such a way as to provide answer or the result of hypothesis testing as found by the study. Remember your hypothesis. Your summary has to be written in a way that you get the answers you need to all the research questions and hypotheses, both of which must have been stated in the beginning or introductory chapter. Remember your introductory chapter. represents the main essence of what the researcher has done and found as a result of his investigation. So the whole summary is telling us the main essence of your what you have actually done, the essence of your what you're going into this research in the first place. So it is usually presented in the form of itemization or listing, with each item corresponding to a research question, hypothesis, or both, as the case may be. That is the summary. It's very, very important. Then after the summary, we go into the conclusion. Conclusion. Remember, you have to do all those things so that you don't make nonsense of your efforts, all your efforts in getting your data and your write-ups and everything. You need to really summarize and conclude very well. So after the summary, we have the conclusion. Conclusion. The conclusion is supposed to be a direct fallout of the summary of the findings. The conclusions, they are supposed to be a direct fallout of the summary of the findings, because it's from the summary you're able to conclude. You don't just conclude if you don't have a good summary. You have to really conclude very well. This is to the extent that some even believe that conclusions are simply an extension of summary of the findings. Yes, since they derive therefrom, you derive your conclusion from your summary. So it's kind of some may look at it as a kind of extension of your summary. Whereas some set out their conclusions in item form, that is numbering or itemizing them, as is the case with summary of the findings. Many others present them in paragraph form. So some do it and number it one after the other, some put it in form of a paragraph. Whichever the case may be, one important thing to bear in mind is that conclusions must not be made outside of the context. That is main findings of the study at hand. So whether you're using itemizing form or you're putting it in paragraph form, the one very important thing is that whatever you're concluding has to be within the context, what you have done. In other words, the conclusion should be solely and directly drawn from the subject of investigation, yes, and even more importantly, the study's major findings. So your conclusion can never go outside what you have done. You're making conclusions based on what you have actually done within the context of the work. In essence, the conclusions of a study could be described simply as the researcher's understanding of the implications of the study's findings. The way you understand the implications of your work. We go to recommendation. Recommendation. After your conclusion, you have your recommendation. It is from your conclusion you're able to get you recommend based on your summary and your conclusion, what you have concluded. It is from that conclusion that you begin to make your recommendation. Remember, the aim of the work is to add to the already existing knowledge. You have to put something new, bring out something new for us. So your recommendation really matters a lot. This is also directly linked with both the summary of the findings and the conclusions already stated above. So they have a kind of linkage. Precisely, recommendations are meant to serve as suggestions on how to improve the present state of affairs as revealed by the study's findings. It's meant to serve as suggestions on how to improve the present state of affairs as revealed by the study's findings. So You're making a kind of suggestion, suggesting ways of making it better. It's all about making what is on ground better off. So your suggestions, your recommendations will help to make it better than what is already in existence. The recommendations are expected to address salient issues. The recommendations are expected to address might have been raised in the course of the investigation. Hence, they should target the relevant segments of the society with a view of improving upon the existing practices in that particular area of study. Be in 2001. Okay, so like we said, your recommendations to be aimed at addressing issues that are already in existence, something that will make your own work unique, better than what we already have on ground. So your conclusion, your summary, your conclusion, your recommendations, they are very, very important. Ogini 2001 provides a guide as on what this segment focuses to include. One, one, the group of people or individuals that was studied. Yes, the group of people or individuals, plants or animals or organisms, whatever it was that is studied, it has to be inclusive there. Two, the relations of family members concerned. If you're working with a particular set of, let's say, 6 people, people that have different kinds of diseases, then you look at the relations of family members concerned. Three, the organization in which the project was conducted. Yes, the organization matters. Four, professionals in the field of focus of the research. Definitely, they're not professionals in that particular field. You're not the first person that has worked on it. You're not the first person that has worked in that particular field of research. So they are professionals in it. Other educationists and educational planners, they may or may not be professors, but also educationists in that field. Some researchers, people that are yet to research on it, but they're not putting a full stop on it, it's not ending with you. There are people that still research on it in future. People that will even try to get better than what already get. Concerned leaders and interested individuals. Concerned leaders and interested individuals. It says further that in making recommendations, it is important to clearly state the following. What is responsible for a state of affairs? How to achieve the desired state? What should be avoided? As a researcher, you should be able to give answers to all these questions. What is responsible for a state of affairs? How to achieve the desired state? From your research, you should be able to tell us that. What should be avoided? What should be rectified? The sources needed, how to initiate something, and how to eradicate the undesirable. All these work towards adding to the knowledge, making things better. Remember, if you're not able to make with your research, give us a better state of affairs, then what you have done is of no use. So you have to prove to us that you have actually done some good work. Suggested areas for further study. Once some research projects conclude on recommendatory notes as discussed above, there are others which come further to suggestions for further study. Yeah, some come with recommendations, some come with suggestions, knowing that this particular topic, this particular study requires more investigation. So they make suggestions for further studies on the topic. This segment is devoted to suggesting related and follow-up studies, which interested future researchers can consider. Like I said, you're not the one, you're not the end of the road. There are still other people who are yet to research on this, especially if it's a topic that really affects the public so much. So it's devoted to suggesting related and follow-up studies, which interest future researchers can consider. This is with a view to filling the gap which the present study left unattended to as a result of its own limitations. You know, studies, of course, we are human beings. Studies will definitely have their limitations. So if those limitations really brought in serious gaps, future research on it can help to fill up those gaps. Okay. I think, okay, let's look briefly at this topic 5. Like I said, I don't like rushing you. We'll just do a brief one on this topic 5, but next class we are still coming back to topic 5 because I want you to really understand this and understand it very well. Bibliographic citations and referencing styles. Bibliographic citations and referencing styles. Introduction. Projects and other forms of research report writings are largely technical in nature and has been explained and demonstrated in the preceding chapters. Part of what constitutes this technicality to be found in the way citations and references are made. No project or any other research report, for that matter, can be written independent of what others have done previously on that subject. No man is an island. People have worked on it before you. People are yet going to work after you. So you don't work independent of what has been done on this already. After all, researchers are expected to build on previous efforts of others, to such an extent that what has been done in that area becomes the starting point for the previous study. This is what has been done on that area, and then it tells you up your own work. So, in reference to this previous effort, that the issue of the geographic citation and references became very relevant and important. So, you have the bibliographic citation, okay? At the center of this system lies the critical issue of using and referring to previous efforts in what area, what their areas of interest were, how they carried out the project, what outcomes were, and so on. So your literature review showed us how you carried out your interest in the work and all that. So we're also going to look at, that is in the next class, we're going to look at the styles of references. We're going to be looking at how you make your references, how you write them out. References that involve one person, one name, two names, and so on. We have the different classes, the traditional or classic format, the author date format, traditional or classic format. So next class, like I said, we are going to go into details of these references, bibliographic citation kinds of references. So we are going to call it a day today, and next class we go into this topic 5 in detail. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the lecture. I wish you a very lovely day. Bye.